The Quakers take his recommendation because Booker T is the star of the late 19th century in terms of educating freed slaves. And they therefore move the institute from Philadelphia, downtown Philadelphia, to Cheney, Pennsylvania, and they rename it Cheney State Normal School. And they began to emphasize teaching industrial arts and agriculture. And they put out the woman principal who had been doing this outstanding job, and as a result of her principalship had been producing doctors, lawyers, and all this kind of stuff. And so they sent them out to the farm, and it becomes Cheney University. And so that's why when I hear Cheney State call itself the earliest HBCU and they don't acknowledge that history, then that's a problem. Cheney State is an accommodationist and assimilationist institution born out of the unique education that original HBCUs or schools founded for and staffed by Black people, that's what it becomes later on. And so when we look at HBCUs, there is, and you look at the histories of these institutions, there is no doubt that HBCUs were created to support and help perpetuate white supremacy. That's what most of them were founded for, with the exception of private schools like Wilberforce and Lincoln University of Missouri. Now, these two institutions were founded by Black people for Black people, and the money was raised by Black people. The buildings were built. So in that sense, they are the purest, in my view, what we might call historically Black colleges and universities. As a matter of fact, Lincoln in Missouri, to me, is a tragedy because it is the only institution of higher learning that was founded by regular rank and file Black men, specifically ex-Buffalo soldiers who had fought in the Civil War on the side of the Union and actually scraped together their money and said, they were from Missouri in the Midwest, and they said, we need our own school now that people are free and now that the war is over. We need a place where we can go learn about the world and ourselves and be better. And they scraped their money together, these men as soldiers who were often not even paid for their fighting in the Civil War, but they scraped their money together. And the good and crazy irony in the United States is because they were Black and they were Moors and some of them were former slaves, they couldn't officially go buy the land themselves. So they asked a white officer who they had served with to go buy this land for them in what is now called Jefferson City, Missouri. And so this white man buys this land for them, and they create Lincoln University of Missouri. So between Wilberforce and Lincoln, Wilberforce is the oldest institution of higher learning that was founded by Black people for Black people. And of course, it was founded by the AME Church. Now, one of the issues that our institutions have, and this is the other thing that causes problems for HBCUs, is like in the case of Lincoln in Missouri, because it's in the capital of Lincoln, it is surveilled constantly by white folks who are concerned about what narratives, what curriculum is being taught at these institutions, because they don't want us to start thinking for ourselves as much. So they have always interfered with Lincoln University in Missouri. And, I had the interesting opportunity to work there for 5 years. And the interesting thing about it is that despite it being founded by Black soldiers at this particular point in time, it is probably 80% white in terms of faculty and students. And when I worked there, one of the things that happened often was this interference on the part of the state into the curriculum and into the staffing of these institutions. And that's part of the problem with HBCUs, is that there still remains this fear and the need to control what these institutions do by the white folks in power. And so given all of the problems and concerns that we have about HBCUs, from funding to staffing, we have to understand that we live in a racist society and we have our own institutions and we've always fought to have them. However, we have not been able to get out of the white gaze, and therefore the white gaze leads to white interference, as well as some of our own people putting forth effort to make the white folks happy and keep the institutions going. So in our own way, HBCUs perpetuate white supremacy in various kinds of ways, from the kind of people we hire to our own self-hatred. And I've seen this everywhere. But despite all of these things, I believe HBCUs are the only places where we can, at the same time we're dealing with racism and white prejudice and interference, they are also the only spaces that I know in academia that I believe are places where we can actively fight against it. So for me, after working at PWIs, and, having classrooms where, my authority, just because of my race, and I have degrees, even the students didn't want to listen to me. And I felt like I had to perform in a different way. I prefer the spaces of HBCUs because despite all of the problems, the notion with funding, the notions of Uncle Toms in administrative positions and racist white faculty who want to be at our institutions, I believe, just for surveillance and attempts to control, I have been able to make more of a difference for students who look like me in those spaces than I ever could at a PWI. The freedom to bring in materials that I know students don't get it at PWIs, the curriculum, the kinds of classes we teach, the way we teach. There's a freedom there for people who look like me to add to the education of my students and even my colleagues in ways that I can't do at these other institutions. So, I prefer them because I can be myself, and I feel like I'm being of use, because what is the point of me achieving these things and working at a PWI when I might have, between 2 semesters and teaching 100 students, I might see 10 students who look like me, as opposed to being able to interact with classrooms where white people are the minority. And I have the opportunity to change their mind and to show them a different way of being than what they've known. So HBCUs have contributed to white supremacy. Most of them were initiated because of racism and white supremacy, but they're not the same spaces. And I believe that if we work more conscientiously, and maybe if we had some of these star Black people who were doing the hashtag Black in the Ivory, if they actually came to the HBCU and worked, who knows what kind of institutions we would have. Or maybe if we changed, our notions of HBCUs, because many of us, even, we point our nose down at HBCUs, and we wouldn't be caught dead. Those of us who think we're great intellects wouldn't be caught dead at HBCU. So the question is, why do you feel that way? As a matter of fact, I have all kinds of stories. One prominent scholar in my field actually told me once, after I talked to them about, how about, you guys at PWIs who look like me, why don't we partner together and do some stuff, and maybe we can help each other. Well, one told me one time that he would come speak at my institution and he would give me the Negro price. Another told me that they had her so busy on the plantation that she didn't know if she had time. And so my question to them was, well, first of all, I don't need your Negro price because I'm not a Negro. And you know what? You can stay where you are. You like being the star for the white folks. That's fine. The other one, I said, well, you chose to be on the plantation. So since you a field hand in the field, maybe you should make a different decision. I'll be over here in my own big house, and y'all need to check your attitudes. So you're acting just like the white folks by saying that the spaces where I work, where you may have to encounter a classroom full of kids who look like you're not comfortable, you're not interested in contributing to that space. That's a problem. So anyway, now you know why I choose to be in these spaces, because I think those are the spaces that have to do the work and that are doing the work to change the whole narrative. I do not believe that scholars of Moorish descent and other colored scholars get a whole lot done to help people and against white supremacy by working at PWIs. And I don't have sympathy for you when you tell me about the overt and the subversive microaggressions and racist encounters you have to have. I don't have any sympathy for you. I can tell you, when I've dealt with a white supremacist in the space of a HBCU, I bet you, I was better able to call it out there than I was at your institution, because I wasn't the minority and other people could see it too. So that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And it's going to exist as long as you live in the United States or any other institution or any country that's been colonized by Europeans and based on slavery. You're going to have this. But what is the best space for you to do the work to help your fellow man, your fellow Moor, your fellow African American? What space is that? So despite their problems, despite the issues that force them to support white supremacy and support the notion that white is right, and if you black, get back, I say, and I do believe, after all these years of working in these spaces, that HBCUs are the spaces where we can do the most good to the most people who look like me and look like other people of color. So I don't see a reason, and I have no desire. You can keep your money. I have no desire to necessarily work with you because, while we can do some work to help white people be better, I'm trying to help my own be better, know better, and then make the world a better place. So anyway, on Juneteenth, so if we're talking about and celebrating supposed freedom, how about we work with our own people to help them know what that freedom is and know what the responsibility of being free is. Don't let our folks be the last ones to know that they can and are free. So why would I work at a PWI? I don't have time for that. And I don't have time for y'all dogging HBCUs because they got problems. Well, why do they have problems? You think that's a coincidence? They got problems because they want them to have problems.